Hi, welcome back to Inspiring Builds. I'm Dan, and today I'm going to show you how to easily build a sturdy workbench that looks great for under $100. You can knock this out in as little as 2 hours, and it will last a lifetime. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those bell notifications so you don't miss any of these tutorials. This workbench is simply built using 6 2x4s and 1 sheet of 3/4 inch plywood that costs $98.23 as shown on the receipt. Here's the cut list for the 2x4s. The 3/4 inch plywood was cut to 60 inches long, with the top being 24 inches wide and the shelf being 12 inches wide. I had a local big box store cut the plywood to size. Before starting, ensure to wear proper PPE. I wear safety glasses and ear protection when using a miter saw. I always trim the ends to ensure the lumber is square and I have a clean cut. Reference the cut list with the measurements provided for each board. Use a speed square, and I believe in cutting once and measuring twice. Don't forget not to cut directly on the line, as your boards will come up short. You want the blade to be beside the cut line. In this instance, the blade will be to the right of the cut line. When cutting, stack all of your boards by size, and when you are finished, you will have 18 total 2x4s for the frame of your workbench. This is a miter saw hack to maximize efficiency. When doing repetitive cuts like you will when building a workbench, it cuts down on a ton of time using a stop block. It's simple, as you can use a scrap piece of wood and clamp it down as shown, but I would make sure you have a small cutaway in the corner. I strongly recommend the cutaway, as sawdust will get in the corner that will be hard to get out otherwise, which will then cause you to have inaccurate cuts. For the framing, I use number 9 3 1/8 inch multi-purpose screws and an impact driver to make quick work of the build. This size is probably a bit of overkill, however I wanted to build a sturdy bench and also already had these screws on hand, keeping the cost down. Your top is only going to be as flat as the surface you're building it on. Grab a level and ensure you're working on a level surface. This is the top of the frame, and you will use 2 57 inch boards for the front and back and 2 21 inch boards for the sides. Use a speed square to ensure you're square, and then drive the screws in with the impact driver. Next, evenly space out 3 18 inch boards and drive those in to complete the top frame of the workbench. For the legs, use 4 35.5 inch boards and 3 screws per board. Ensure your legs are square, and you can double check by measuring the distance between the 2 legs at the top and bottom. I made sure to drive 1 screw on each board into the end grain of the side boards on the top frame. This isn't necessary, but adds support. After turning over the workbench, I checked how sturdy it already was and ensured it was level as shown. To build the bottom shelf frame, use 2 57 inch boards for the front and back and 2 21 inch boards for the sides. I laid out the boards on top of the top frame and drove in the screws after the frame was square. Use clamps if needed. Next, evenly space out the 3 9 inch boards and drive those in to complete the bottom shelf. Measure 9 inches up on each leg and make a mark. You will use these marks to line up the bottom of the shelf frame to install it to the legs of the workbench later. I use paint cans to do a test fit. I used a Craig jig to make pocket hole screws to prep the top frame and shelf frame to install the tops. Align and clamp the top shelf to the frame, then flip it over and drill 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws into the top all the way around. I used 12 screws total for the bottom shelf. I used a mouse sander to sand the shelf top and sides down with 220 grit sandpaper to prep it for a nice smooth finish. I made this workbench for free to help out a good neighbor so I carried the frame to the garage to finish the rest of the project. Align and clamp the workbench top to the frame. I used 14 total 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws to secure the top. Sand the top of the workbench down and all 4 sides with 220 grit sandpaper. Use paint cans to guide as an extra helper to install the shelf to the legs. Ensure the shelf is level and drill 2 3 1/8 inch screws in each leg with the bottom of the shelf frame lining up with the 9-inch mark we made earlier. The workbench is finished at this point with the natural finish. However, I'm going to take it to the next level. As I mentioned before, this is going to a good neighbor. When finishing workbench tops, natural shellac is one of my favorites. Shellac is a resin made from the lac bugs of Southeast Asia. I like it as it's non-toxic with no fumes. It's safe for surfaces pets and children will be exposed to. It's super easy to work with as it dries very quickly, and it's easy to apply. I used a foam applicator as all supplies outside of the lumber I already had. Shellac also provides a hard finish that doesn't yellow, and you can easily make repairs down the road by applying a new top coat to get rid of scratches or blemishes. You can see how quickly the first coat dried, as by the time I finished the coat on the bottom shelf, the top was ready for coat number 2. Since we are finishing the tops, we can't have any screws showing, can we? I used all-purpose wood filler that goes on pink and dries with a natural wood finish when it's ready to sand. Use 220 grit sandpaper to sand down the wood filler in the direction of the wood grain until you see the round fill holes and the lumber is smooth. The plywood tops are ready to be sanded with 220 grit sandpaper after 2 coats of shellac as well. Shellac dries kind of rough after a couple of coats, and sanding after coat number 2 will make it super smooth and ready for the next coats. Wipe off the tops a couple of times to remove all of the dust. Apply the 3rd coat of shellac and you will see how easy this goes on, being so smooth and how great it looks. I left the bottom shelf with 3 coats, but added a 4th coat on the top of the workbench. When I applied the 4th and final coat, I did not apply it in sections. I did 1 full pass the entire 60-inch width of the workbench for an amazing finish. I'm curious to hear what you think in the comments below. Let me know your favorite finishes for workbenches. Please don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already.